where you'll share back about the events that you attended, your highlight, and a key message or key takeaway that you'd like your colleagues to have before you head into decision making. The second part, Jacinta will lead us through updated information, updates and responses that we've prepared to some of the questions you've asked us to assist your decision making. And then David and I will ask you whether there's any additional information that you would like to have before deliberations. So the first part, and all of it actually is really in the do section. We are here in May, quite close towards that June part, but the really key time. And to assist us with that, this first part, the consultation conversation, is aimed to help ensure that everybody has the big picture. You've all got all of the submissions, been able to hear all of the oral submissions, see the videos. This one, we have 34 events. People, can't be in two places at once or attend 34 events. So to share the experiences, the takeaways with your colleagues so that you've all got a similar picture before you head into deliberations. So I'm going to pass over to Anne. She's going to talk us through all of the material that you see here and then take us through this next part. So.
Tala Falava, Tamia and councillors. So I guess this is the cool part I get to do with you, as it's been a pleasure going along with many of you to some of the events. So yeah, looking forward to hearing your experiences and sharing those key messages that you'd like your colleagues to take away today. So just to refresh your memories, there are 34 consultation events ranging from Facebook Lives, a couple of a councillor citizens panel, schools focus groups such as MTA Rangatahi session and Pacifica sessions. So as you can see, with the amazing support of Adam and also Michelle, Lisa and the team, we've managed to get all the materials such as brainstorming or any post-it notes from any focus groups or events that we attended, and so we've got them on these boards displayed for you to see directly their voice on paper. So rather than us going away and summarizing what the key points were, we thought it would be awesome for you to see exactly, and hear that voice by when you read it. So we've got all the schools on, so we've got like Waipihu College, and we also got Levin Intermediate, which was our 5-week elective. We also have Horowhenua College and Levin East School on this side here. And then we also have the MTA Rangatahi session, but also behind every board we've got also either the same school or another focus group or event that we attended. So we also got the Rangatahi Voice focus group behind here that was at Te Tākere that we had during that process. And then on this side we've got our community groups such as Unison Community Choir. And then behind, we also got the Pacific Leaders Forum that we also hosted here at Council. And then as you see, there's amazing, so many post-it notes. And as you also look behind, this is from the citizens panel. So there were, is it 3 in total? That also included the Ratepayer Association from the Sunday. And so we had a lovely a man who came up today when we were putting it up, and he was like, oh, where's mine? And is it in there? So it was really nice to say, yes, it's all in there. And then we also got Manawatu College on this end. So what we would like to give you about a couple of minutes to go around the room and to share which events you attended. So, because many of you would have attended like different ones as well, and like who was the target audience, whether it was youth or like who was your target audience, and then your key highlight from that event and a key message that you'd like your colleagues to take away. And I guess it helps to build that shared fuller picture of what that consultation events overall looked like. And so there may be one that you wanted to attend, but you didn't get the chance, but you're wanting to know how did that go. So this is a great opportunity to hear from each other. So I know that we're really pressed for time, so I'm gonna hopefully hand it over to Mia Bernie to kick us off. There's only a few, so which events, so you got 2 minutes to share which events you attended, who were there, or what the target audience, your key highlight, and a key message that you'd like everyone to take away from that engagement. And you can gift any spare seconds to anyone else. Hopefully we don't need to get the bell out today, but we will definitely get started, so I don't take any more time.
I need to go through my calendar to make sure I tell you which ones I did. I'm not sure how many I did, to be honest, but there were quite a few. Look, I enjoyed... What's wrong with this?
Oh, no.
I enjoyed the Facebook Live posts were great. The citizen panels were great. Enjoyed some of the meeting with the mayor. But I think my highlight was definitely the Unison choir. First of all, going to their to Whaimahana to hear them and listen to them, but also being welcomed the way we were. But having them actually think about what their town was and how they engage with it and things like that, and getting to think about the future was great. What was the last one, Andrew, about the lessons? Key messages? Oh, I think just spreading the word about how good the town is and things like that. That I was actually quietly encouraged by the number of people that didn't focus just on the rates issue. Actually, that for me was their realisation that we were doing the best we could and understood the challenges and some of the perspectives that we had to operate under. But I think the extent that we went to try and listen to people was really good, and that'll do for me.
Okay.
I did the community panel one. The feedback from those were really cool. Well, that one was really cool because I was there. But people really enjoyed it. I think it was you guys did a great job with that. It was really interactive, and those exercises, like getting them to spend the money. What are they going to do with that? And that was really good. And the feedback we got from the people there, from my point of view, was they really liked that kind of inclusive kind of thing of it. Coupled with a counsellor. Oh, that wasn't memorable because I can't really remember what they had to say about that. And we probably got the usual 1 or 2 turn-ups. Overall, the message that came back was climate change is bunkum and stop wasting money.
Okay, so attended Moopacore Tribal Authority community one on the Friday, the Unison one over in Hanana, Shannon, the Pacifica Leaders. Probably, it's always enjoyable when you're working with kids because they dream big, and there's no barrier other than the finances, but dreaming. So things that they'd like to see, which some of them are probably really achievable, and also encouraging them to not be afraid of this place and coming in to speak, which so it was great last week to see them come in and do a verbal submission. So that was really great to see. Highlights. I think Unison, because of the welcome and the engagement with the kids. Highlights, that's probably it. Take-home message. For me, the one that stuck out the most was probably when we did the Shannon one. One of the parting comments that I got from an old Kui that attended was, "Don't forget us. We're a part of this community. We're always forgotten." So that was one of mine. And huge appreciation to the staff that attended and supported us while we were working with our community. So, yeah.
Kia ora. Managed to get to a couple of them. A couple of the council, Waipu College Intermediate Unison Citizen Advice Panels, and Shannon as well. Manawatu College HCC Ratepayers Pacific Whānau, and Tūmatakauki. All age groups, which was really neat to see the variety of age groups we were able to engage and the range of engagements. I think the highlight for me was really the youth voice, although maybe not prioritised in their minds about what's important, but certainly to hear from them was really neat, and the video submissions that they did with our team I think was incredible. Really appreciate the staff, the support that you gave us when we were out there and engaging, and the openness of the community accepting us to come along and share, I think was amazing. I suppose for me moving forward it's just building on what we did, and I have had some comments saying we didn't get out to the elderly enough. We kept it specific to like Ratepayers Association and things like that, and so some of the comment I did hear was it would have been good to get in front of some rest homes and things like that, to really get our voice in front of the elderly part of our community. But other than that, what a great process to be a part of, and really good, encouraging.
I've already said that I'll give some seconds to David because he's got quite a bit to say. So, most of my comments should have all relate to Shannon, and that was with a couple of the councillor a couple of times, and then I met with the Shannon Progressive Association and just ran through those slides with them. And for me, I think like being able to again probably prioritise that spend, where they think things are important or believe things are important for them as a community, I think was quite a good useful tool, and that's something I think would be quite good, utilising that sort of material going forward. For me too, as probably Bernie's mentioned, like the rates increase wasn't actually the top of the priority. It was more around a lot of the content I sort of felt was business as usual, and doing it right, like the nuts and bolts stuff, you're roading. Obviously, we talk about toilets and Shannon a lot, getting them done. Obviously, the water wheel seems to be one of those sort of legacy things that maybe I could tick off before I leave council. But it's sort of, it's not, I don't think it's massively out of reach to actually achieve some of what's needed in the community, or what they believe is needed in the community. That was good. David and I actually went to Tokomaru just before it opened and went through some of the slides there too. And again, I don't think there was anything that was significant there, but just doing business as usual and making sure we're doing a good job for that community, I think was so.
Microphone.
Yeah, so I attended the first citizens panel here, along with Mike and Clint, and also the one out at Shannon. And the Shannon one, I thought if someone came along and asked that we hold it out there, and that was really good. It was about 21 from memory attended. Good, felt like a good cross section, and Justin, you were there too, along with Clint. And I was also at the couple with the councillor for all of them at Foxton except for one in Levin. And so in terms of, for me, it felt like a reasonably good mix, except the absence of youth, which I guess you would expect in those two particular engagement strategies. So it was great that we deliberately went in with out into the school and so on and made sure the voice of youth was heard. The highlight for me was that on all those occasions, particularly those two citizens panels, the face of council was welcomed by the participants. They felt a team council at play, and I'm talking about the officer level, the elected members who did team tag very effortlessly and well. So it really felt like the council as an organic whole was engaging with the community, if that makes sense. And I think that was something that built a lot of faith and trust when it came to them engaging. So the citizens panel, they were really on fire, both of them, both panels, and they really enjoyed the "you are a councillor, what would you do" type stuff and so on. So I think that was the highlight. The key message, again, I'm sort of echoing what other people have said. It was that they were engaging in what are some options, what are some other things we can do. The actual rating issue was not very much about the 17.4. It was about how can we make it bigger or smaller, so it wasn't sort of that pullback. And just leave you with the last thing, and Anne and Jacinta were there when we did the I went to Greypound too. And at that forum, Clint actually asked the question, he held a poll, who would do the 23, who would do the 17, who would do the less than, and over a third of the Grey Power members voted for 17.4. So, and that is traditionally the group you expect to say, this is about lowering our rates. That's my focus, so laser focus. So even that forum there, they could see the challenges and so on. So, yeah, that's me.
Kia ora. I attended a citizens panel here in the chambers. I attended a session with Horowhenua College in here. I did 2 sessions at Levin Intermediate. I did a couple with a counsellor, and I've had phone calls. So there's, other than the school groups, there's been obviously a mix across ages. Obviously, most of what I've done is in Levin, but I'm a Levin ward counsellor, and we effectively all share the load, so we spread out, yeah. But I guess that what I heard across forums that was the same, be it youth or adults, was the lake. We want to swim in it, we want to do waka ama on there. It's a shame it's not usable. It has a lot of potential. You've heard all these things before, but I guess I heard it from all ages. And savings, I was asked often, like, other than the list of potential savings in the consultation document, is there any others? Is there any other things we could choose to save in then, rather than just what you've put in front of us? And then another question asked a couple times was, have we anticipated or factored in to the budget a level of perhaps rates arrears, considering the challenge around affordability? And I couldn't answer the question, but that's not to say I wasn't going to seek out the answer. So that's me.
I'll go now, to sort of give you a breather, Clint, so you can tune into. So yeah, I attended a couple of the councillors, Manawatu College, Horowhenua ratepayers, rural ratepayers, did a citizens panel, a couple of Facebook Lives, and probably the highlight of the whole thing was the intermediate elective. That was thoroughly enjoyable, and it was great to see the kids' confidence grow and actually how much wisdom our young people have. Like it was quite. You felt like a proud parent by the end of it. But I heard a lot of stuff through the process around user pays, cut the fat, focus on core. Kind of those key things. And I think the real opportunity was to not just have a 1-minute conversation or a phone call or an email. It was actually being able to engage with people and get into a little more detail. And so there really was that acceptance of the need for tough choices, trade-offs, and I think that recognition that there's always going to be an impact on people, whether it's a financial one for a rates bill or in order to achieve a lower rates bill, that there's an impact on people in terms of services. And I often use the example of how long are you willing to wait to get a call back to your phone call for asking for help from council, because people talk about you're wanting to cut budgets, but actually it translates into a service and the level of service they want to enjoy. So I think there's lots of little pieces that will come through obviously in deliberations. The solid waste rate in terms of the differential for rural, there was quite a strong theme there, and the representation and governance moving there, and and also, sorry, just last thing, it was a real highlight to get to know Anne through this process. It was really nice to get to know Lisa, also planner Lisa, who I had quite a lot of time with and a couple of the councillors. So it's been a really positive process. So thanks to you and the team.
I will say that I didn't do a damn thing. So, and I apologise for that because I was away. I consciously decided not to participate in some of these activities because I was away. But I think, from what I've seen and what you did was fantastic. The level of engagement was amazing. I'm disappointed that I couldn't participate more in some of these processes and some of these activities. And I feel disadvantaged for it. So.
I guess I got to citizens panels in Levin and Shannon. I did a trip up the road to go to Manawatu College at some point. I think rural ratepayers, great power. For me, probably was hearing those clips. The youth involvement was really powerful. So quite well done to those councillors that did manage to get into the schools and engage at that level. And I think it was a useful reminder around, what that future generation is going to want us to deliver on or move towards. So I liked hearing those voices. For me, what was probably quite insightful was the Grey Power presentation that David battled through a skylight being put in and not having a PowerPoint, and what could go wrong was going wrong. But I guess getting to a point, particularly with that group of people, where we managed to do a bit of a snap poll with them around, this is what option 1 looks like, this is what option 2 is, this is what option 3 is, and actually just seeing that, when you asked about option 1, there was not a single hand in a room that went up. When you asked about option 2 and then we waited 9 seconds, there were a lot more hands go up into the air at that point. And then when we asked about option 3, there were no hands that went up as well. And I think it's quite reflective of the conversation that we've been having with the community, that they're just as hesitant to cut services than what we are, let alone pinpoint exactly which services to cut. So we've got a challenge ahead of us come deliberations, but I think that'll be me.
Thank you all very much. I hope you found that helpful as well as insightful. There's certainly, a lot that happened. Great.
Sorry, Karen, can I just add to that? I think that the amount of work that we did through the consultation process had a big difference had a big impact on the number of people that actually wanted to come and talk to us at hearings, because we only had 52 people in the end that came and talked to us. And I think a lot of them would have come if they hadn't been engaged in citizen panels, a couple of councillors and all those other bits and pieces that we did, because we were able to answer the questions that they had at the time. So while it might have seemed 35 engagements might have seemed a lot, I think it proved its worth in terms of the response that we got and people wanting to talk to us at submissions. So congratulations in terms of organising them.
So now we will move into a different part of our big team effort and turn our focus to some information from Jacinta.
Thank you. So through this next stage, the intention is to give you an update on anything that's happened within the organisation since we went out for consultation, but also through this process, we hope to, by the end of this, we've got basically, as we've been building the slide deck to talk to you about today, we've been including links to additional information that we think would assist you in your final decisions. For example, the Capital 20-year program that we have been through 2 workshops on but need to be decided for deliberations, that's in there. So as we work through it today, I've got the presentation open on the screen, and what we'll do is we'll take notes if there's additional information you think you might want to consider or have available to you as you lead into deliberations. It would be great if you could signal that through this process so that we can try and capture it all, so we've got something concise for you to use as you get ready for deliberations. So the first one that we heard was around the growth. Was the question around, we've assumed a certain level of, so in the first year, we've assumed a 2% growth in terms of the number of households, and we've also assumed a certain level of development contributions. So what we heard was that, and we need to do it ourselves, is make sure that we've got a really clear view of what we're expecting to come in the door in terms of growth for next year and in terms of housing growth between now and next year, because that affects the average rates increase that we expect people to have. So we're actively working on that. So one thing, for example, in the planning and regulatory team, they're having a look at all of the resource consents that we've issued but haven't yet received 224 that would have had a development contribution assessed against them, so we can understand what stage some of those developments are in the process, so that there's a good indication of what that cash flow is going to look like. We have been more conservative through this, and I'll talk to you about that in the borrowings, because I think it's always good to be more conservative and for us to get a little bit more in the door than we think, if that is to be the case. In terms of the rates increase, we've been doing a lot of work internally, and we'll talk through what that is made up of. But at this stage, we have been able to bring the number down to a proposed rates increase of 16.0% rather than the 17.4%. So this, Yeah, it feels like it does need one of those actually. So in terms of what that means, I'll quickly talk it through. Depreciation is one thing. So when we set the long-term plan for draft, we had an assumed level of capital program and an assumed level of which projects were going to happen where, and because we ended up with a capital program as start that was bigger than we could afford, we needed to make some assumptions around where that depreciation would be. That's actually landed us now as we've run everything through with the 20-year capital program that we've set, is a reduction of 100,000. Sorry, that doesn't have a bracket around it, but that's a reduction of 0.2% in terms of that. And note there are things going both ways. Interest. So there is a couple of things in that space, making sure we've got our rates aligned with where Bancorp would like them to be. And also a significant contributor to that is around our capital grants, is the timing of those CIP grants initially, and some of the better off funding were intended to come this year, and now they will be delayed until next year. So that means a hit on timing in terms of interest rates for that period. In terms of the three water service delivery, you've had a conversation earlier along some of that. 600K of this amount, though, does relate to really detailed work that Rob has completed, understanding exactly the makeup of that agreement. And what we've realised through that is some of the work that was previously classified as maintenance is now more appropriately can be funded as a capital project, and that's helped with the work that we've done around all of our assets moving. All of our water assets are now all in one asset management system. So as we work through all of that work, that's helped us to identify some refinement in that space. On the other side of that, in the software license space, there is 70 or 80,000 worth of licenses, which were previously planned to be funded through debt, and that was because they relate to software as a service or cloud-based software that's going into implementation. But at this stage, those licenses should be classified as a rates-funded item. Over a 2-year period, they net out to zero. It's just that impact in that first year. As well, the most significant one is during the long-term plan, we identified $500,000 at your request in as a savings target that was identified in the draft long-term plan budget. The change program, which is due to be finalized on Friday, has identified additional savings, another 400 and some thousand, in addition to the 500,000 that was targeted. So that further reduces the impact on rates. As well, there's about 30,000 of rats and mice across the organisation that's been saved. But also, as we set our rates for this year, we actually, in terms of what's coming through in the final total rates that people have been charged, that's increased a little bit more than we had anticipated. And so the base or the starting point with which you calculate that increase from has grown a little bit. So that helps the average or the spread to be a bit more. Does anyone have any questions or want to talk through that in any detail?
Sorry, I might have missed your comment, but if we do get a change or a downgrade in our credit rating, what's the impact in terms of that? I assume it'll be from 1 July. So do we have any idea?
It hits us pretty much straight away. So Standard & Poor's are here tomorrow, and they have signalled with a nice message coming through as a bit of a warning to New Zealand councils again, that they're looking very closely at our debt levels. I know New Plymouth has just had theirs affirmed, but for us, I'd say we would be challenged, one of the more challenged councils in terms of the level of our debt. And so it will be hard to get through this Standard & Poor's rating without a downgrade, because they have signalled a negative outlook for all of the councils anyway. And it's not necessarily a reflection of us and what we're doing, but it is a reflection of the New Zealand environment. Yeah.
So the impact of that is not in here, Mayor Bernie. Yeah. But Jacinta, do you have an
Idea what it
assumption?
Yeah, assumptions that it might be.
It's about it's 0.05. It's not a 0.5%. It's half of 0.5%. So it's probably about 90,000, 90 to 100.
So just looking at looking at like the interest, and I guess even given that possible downgrade, going into 25, like interest rates are projected to come back slightly, especially probably in the first quarter. How do you project some of that stuff? Like, have you sort of looked at that as far as pulling it back slightly?
Yes, we have. We have. And we've also made sure, for example, in terms of the interest-free loan that we've got, making sure that's factored in well. So they are pegged to come down a bit. Yeah, so we have built that in. But fair to say, there isn't any fat in those predictions for us. We haven't loaded any contingency onto it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, conscious that we don't want to create a space tonight where council start getting into deliberations, but what we wanted to do was be really upfront about how the work that we've done over the last month or so lands you in a position where option 2 was looking at 17.4%. Option 2 would now be looking at 16%. But what we know is that we've got the Standard & Poor's credit rating, which will have an impact. And I don't want to make it sound like it's a small impact, because 90k has an impact. Every dollar counts. But part of the rationale for putting so much emphasis on this work is because of acknowledging the really tough conversations and decisions you're going to have to make as a council, but also just being really aware of the ever-changing environment we're operating in. And so, for example, our budgets currently do not forecast the fact that next year we're likely to have to do a referendum around the Māori wards. We've had a quote today that's an extra potentially 30 to 40k in our election budget that we've not forecasted. So that's one thing, but there will be some things, and through a zero-based budgeting process, you all know we've not built any fat into the system. And so by being really upfront with you about getting it down to 16, hopefully it helps you as elected members create the space for the conversations you need to have about those level of service impacts ahead of deliberations in a couple of weeks.
Just to flag as well, things like insurance worry me a bit. There's some pressures which we don't know about that we've done our best to estimate, but then we definitely got, and there always will be pressures to come, and we'll manage them. But
Oh, you're there. I don't have to ask.
do you mean in terms of potential further options? Yeah, so for us, I guess, is we don't need to, I know time is limited tonight, but it would be if there are particular things that you think you would like to raise during deliberations that might need some more work, or you might want us to work up what that means so that it is ready to go for deliberations. It'd be really good if you would signal them to us so that we can help to make that process as efficient as it can be.
Yeah, just on the depreciation, everyone heard my question during the hearings around some more data and calculations, and that's being produced, and I'm yet to go through it and everyone will get it too. But I guess without the numbers in front of me, if you have the number in mind, what is the fully funded, so not per activity as I asked, but just what is the fully funded depreciation amount for year one, and then assuming we fully fund it's just 100% of it, right? But if it was 80 or 90%, what would that number be? Therefore, what does the 100,000 on the previous page translate to as a percentage of unfunded depreciation?
What I think might be useful, and I was going to start to put it into the slide, but I ended up not doing it. Is the 100,000 is just under a quarter of a percent. So you say 525,000 is 1%, and so the total depreciation for next year is 22.7 million. But what I want to read, what I think it's really important, because I heard it through the submissions that we're double dipping or double counting, depreciation is effectively only a word used to calculate principal repayment. We don't have a separate principal repayment that comes from somewhere. That is all that depreciation is acting as a proxy for, is for us to repay our debt, so that our debt goes down to a level that when we need to replace, we have room in that for the future. And so the conversation around, and I know Councillor Jennings, for example, would be keen to have a conversation about another way to talk about that. So in the future, for example, you could have a conversation about, we only want to repay 5 to 7 to 10% of our debt in any year through rates funding. And that's another way that you could talk about using rates to make sure that we're reducing our debt in a way that allows it to be sustainable in the long term. So really with your conversations is, if you pull anything in terms of a rates funding, then you're going to argue that that's effectively going to be more debt, because it is effectively our principal repayment. So it absolutely can be a conversation that you have. But for us in the first, and I'll quickly flick to it, for us in the first 6 years, any reduction in depreciation funding or principal repayment is going to mean less capital projects. So that's where we get into a tricky spot.
And if we were in a council that was in an environment where we had low debt or had not loaded things onto our balance sheet, then we could be having that conversation. But that, so when we talk about our financial levers, that lever of depreciation or paying back the principal on the money we borrowed in the past, that lever is a hard one to pull because of that red line.
Probably that is the key reason why, when we talk about moving to fully funding, that then once we are fully funded, and in these years we are using some rates to pay more back, so that there is that capacity in our debt for the future.
Jacinta, I think in the deliberation reports we're still going to provide some analysis to elected members on, well, despite that advice, like what are your options? Because obviously within option 3 of topic 1, there was an additional option there around, further reducing the funding of depreciation. So council knows there is some options, but it's just about us also being aware of the consequence of those options.
Mm.
Just a question on that 16%, and so I'm just thinking for the report. Don't we need to stick with an option 2 that is what we consulted on, and then that becomes almost an option 2A, so that, because aren't we already essentially saying that this is a option 3? So just from because I think it could get confusing and messy and talking about submissions and other things if the starting point is different. But I'm really welcome your response to that.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if that's how I would suggest you approach that, and I don't know whether that's the common practice of councils. This is us coming to you and say, hey, we've done some additional work. Some of that is a reflection of external pressures that we don't have a say in. But what it's allowing council is that so if you think about the contract with community or the service to community, you're still able to debate option 2. It's just option 2 is at a different price, if that's what we want to call it. I don't think your option changes, but ultimately, and I know that Carol and David will get to this in the workshop a little bit later, is that part of what we're looking for your advice on tonight is that when you do have your deliberations, obviously there's option 2 and option 3. Probably what I've got a little bit of a sense of is that there might be an appetite for a bit of pick and mix of 2 and 3, and so how our deliberations report can allow good decision making around the pick and mix.
Jacinta, for deliberations, particularly around the depreciation conversation of the down payment of debt, I know often we quite frame it as looking forward. I'd actually quite like to see a demographic of looking back. So looking back 10 years, because a lot of the feedback through deliberations is council debt has continued to increase or council have continued to spend. So when it comes to a conversation about depreciation, it's actually, it's not necessarily council spending. It's council after council after council not choosing to pay back the money that they've borrowed and it going on debt that helps grow that. So I think it would be useful as it's both an argument for and a counter argument against, but I think it gives that picture around the impact of choosing not to fund depreciation has on that debt level to get us to this point.
Sure, can do. Is that so? That's along the lines of what we're doing in that, but we can look to go back. That's fine. Yeah, sure. Yeah, Councillor Jennings, sorry, you had a question, did you? So we will also include, because I think it's helpful. I hope it's. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, carry on. I'll finish when you. This is kind of coming back to Sam's point about option 2 and 2A and the pick and mix, and some of the summaries that we've had don't quite talk about that. We're going to get something a bit more directed in the next week if that's going to be the case.
So the deliberation reports pick out the key themes and issues and provide recommendations to council. We're not providing officer recommendations on the big topics that you consulted on, but yeah, like I know that Jacinta's been working on the financial matters one today and I've not reviewed it, but if you think about how you've leaped into some of those financial decisions in the past, it's about the consideration of the options and how they come together.
Yeah, okay. I don't want to ask for more work, but in some of the submissions, were there clear themes on the pick and mix options that we should be considering in terms of majorities of different mixes of things?
Yeah, for example, option 3, I was just working on it before, but it says there are, for example, of the 183 that supported option 3, almost all of them, or the majority of them, supported all of the options in option 3 except for the roading. And within that, information services and affordable housing were the highest. Reducing information services was the highest, I think 70-some%, and then the next one was affordable housing. So we're trying to say within those that were selected, this is how many, and this is the top ones that was that along the lines of what you're thinking?
Yeah, just to speed up our processes of our deliberations. If there's some clear data that says this is what the people were wanting in terms of a pick and mix thing. And just coming back to Sam's point about the options and the numbers, I think the questions that were out there weren't specific about a number. It was less than this number, or can you make savings and things like that. So I think we'll be pretty safe to come up with a new number.
think it's very normal for this process to come back where council, there's a separate financial matters report where since deliberations officers have done more work and figured out that there's either some impacts going one way or the other that for to consider as part of that. It's almost like our submission to you as part of the deliberations in a way. So in terms of borrowings, what we'll also include as a link is the file that I look at to say, here's the beginning. These are all of the things that either increase or decrease debt in any given year, so that you, if you'd like to understand the flow of what either increases or decreases it, for those of you that are more visual and like the more detailed view of it, we'll include that as well, because that might be helpful in terms of understanding what all the flows for borrowings are. On the capital side, we've just uploaded to the portal, and apologies, we thought you had it already, but through the workshops and the detailed schedules that we've been through for a couple of workshops to decide, when we set the draft, this is the target we set for the level of capital that was affordable. We had the ideal program, which was the larger program, and what we agreed we would do between the start of consultation and now was to come up with a proposed program, so that when we deliver, so on Friday we're uploading into the portal for the OAG the updated full LTP document to go through hot review, and that will include detailed capital program that matches to the individual file with all of the details of capital that you guys have indicated that you would support. Fair to say that's not final, that's subject to deliberations and decisions by you all, but that is, in terms of getting through the hot review process with the Office of the Auditor General, that is the way that we needed to work with it. So we will send that out to you as well. In terms of timing, I don't think we'll go through it in detail tonight, but we'll include it all. Is there any part of the capital program that anyone would like to discuss this evening?
Just one. So when we did the reprioritisation, we had a second session and not everyone came. And I just want to raise one of the things which was mentioned or floated, and part of it was parked, and that is renewing of a vehicle fleet for the business, which is it's over $4 million across the period, but for the first 2 years it's upwards of 250,000. And so I kind of look, when you talk about fully funding depreciation, it pays back debt or borrowings of the past, and essentially makes room for new borrowings for the next capital projects. Now, we know that that's what it was, 62 or 63, we've got it down to 43 according to that graph. But when I mentioned fleet, and if we perhaps didn't depreciate that amount because we decided, no, it's not going to be renewed, because the part that we parked was, well, perhaps going forward we might look at leasing rather than owning, and therefore, but it's work that's required down the track to review that. So do you see what I mean by countering perhaps that capital spend for vehicles in the next year or two, and then instead of not depreciating 100k, it's 250, because you have left room now, because if we don't do it, we don't have to borrow as much, means you don't have to fully fund by that much the depreciation. I know it's only 22 million overall, did you say? Depreciation.
22.
Yeah. I don't know if I've lost people, but
So off the back of that workshop, we've reduced our capital investment on vehicles by 5 or 10%.
It's 10.
Yeah, by 10%. Technology was 5%. But what I think I'm hearing from you is the suggestion that we test some of the depreciation assumptions around some of those assets.
Yeah, I guess ultimately because if we're not, well, there's that we should fully fund depreciation or we don't buy it in a small amount, I guess, in the scheme of 22 million. But we do it smartly, so it's, there's certain activities that we must fully depreciate, fully fund, and there might be the odd activity, like vehicle fleets that's under treasury, like, if it's water, I wouldn't even suggest it. But you see what I'm saying? Like, we should actually target where the unfunded depreciation is going rather than just say, let's just across the board type of approach.
Yeah, I hear the message, and I don't have the answer right now, but for example, I'd probably even need to test whether we're currently funding depreciation, funding vehicle. We will be, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll come back with some advice on that in the financial matters report.
Ultimately, it's because vehicle fleet doesn't immediately or directly impact our ratepayers. They're not going to know or feel the difference between a 5-year-old car and a 1-year-old car.
Okay. If we head through the capital, but overall, this gives a bit of a sense that the draft had 467. We're now planning to spend a little bit more than that, but this is in terms of the total capital program, which was originally 889, is now coming down to 9. Is a little bit higher, but it's the timing of when it happens that's the difference. So we're still spending about the same amount. It's just the timing of when it occurs. So for the 10-year budget in the draft, the full program was sitting at 565. That's now coming down to 481 million, which is more in line with what we can do to make sure that our borrowings, we don't breach our borrowings.
Just to confirm, there's some quite big placeholders in our ears, right, for strategic projects. And so we don't need to necessarily be worried about the small variances between them, because there's likely to be some significant shifts in that depending on this timing and scale and scope of those strategic projects, right?
Yeah, and at our last capital projects workshop, we obviously got some clear direction around the prioritisation of some of that and shifting some money up front to year one to do that strategy work, so that will help guide and dictate the funding in later years. So some of those big sums of money, not actually a commitment to spend until we actually know what's the wider plan. Parks being an example, sports grounds, aquatics.
Okay, so again, just highlighting when you get your presentation, which will probably be the end of the week by the time we bring it all in, you'll be able to see the different detail that you can click on and look at the detail of all of the supporting information. In terms of the borrowings, just highlighting as well that in the draft, we had some development contributions assumptions in terms of revenue. This is where they sit currently in the draft. We've got 1.5 million budgeted this year for development contributions. It's looking like it may only potentially get up to 900. And so to be conservative, we have lowered the level of revenue that we're expecting from development contributions. Not that we're expecting to get any less, but the timing of it. We don't want to signal that to come in and then it to be less than planned. As well, you can see on the capital grant side, when we were building our initial assumptions, we thought that the fulls would get up to 17 million this year, but with the timing of the Better Off and the CIP funding, that's likely to come in over the next years instead. So those are the two key things that we've changed.
in terms of borrowing assumptions. And you'll see this when it comes, but Councillor Tukapo, it's a great question in terms of looking at different activities and looking at the level of debt within each activity, the level of capital, the level of assets, so that you can understand that flow in terms of the individual activity areas. So that will be included for you as well. Development contributions policy, I might hand over to Daniel to give a brief summary on that side.
Yeah, effectively, if we just flip back to the last slide,
Similar to the approach that we need to connect the capital work program, obviously the changes in the reprioritisation then has a direct impact into the development contribution policy and model. So we do intend to form up a table setting out key changes and impacts across each activity and grouping of line items, so that there's a really clear, rather than expecting elected members to do a deep dive into the two spreadsheets for draft and final, we're looking to summarise that and just really indicate key changes and any potential asset or level of service impacts. So if we could flick to the next slide. In some ways, when we set out on this process in December last year, we, through the development of the long-term plan, have identified that there is a budget shortfall across that program, and it's not what the reprioritisation process wasn't as simple as just reducing to meet budget, because as we went through that process in March and into April, we actually were working with new information that had been uncovered through the ongoing work of Council's work program. So, first bullet point there, effectively, there was around about a $50 million over budget, if you want to call it that, over the 20-year period, and we've been required to push some of that out past the 20-year horizon, but also reprioritise it within the program. We have increased the renewals allocation, so this is off the back of some of our work that was done around our asset condition, that we actually have almost directed some of the additional funding that was provided by, almost that debt headroom, by pulling back on parks investments, by deferring some of these larger capital projects, that we've actually had to redirect some of that into our renewals program. And that's just to ensure that we are following best asset management practices, and certainly to satisfy some of the questions raised by audit around theoretical renewals and depreciation versus what we're actually spending. So we've done some work to align that. It wasn't just as simple as picking the asset age and applying an expected renewal value. We've had to try and do that under the process of this debt ceiling and trying to balance each line item with the next budget. There was also some work to look at the Northeast Live-In, where we, in the draft long-term plan, established a targeted stormwater rate for that area. Quite sensitive to the numbers, because there's effectively, over the next 20 years, predicted to be around about 360 new lots when we went out with the draft long-term plan, but we're already dealing with some developments with increased density in that area, so we've done some reprioritisation, and obviously, as each review of the development contribution takes place, those on-the-ground densities would be taken into account, and at time of assessment, obviously. So that has resulted in quite a significant change from the draft that's pulled that back. We've also been slightly more conservative for the allocation of costs to developers on those longer-term projects in the early stages of development. And effectively what that means is when we've got a project out in year 15 of the long-term plan and it's still in a concept design and consenting phase, we felt that we needed to have some level of conservatism before we can really put our hand out to developers to say you need to contribute X amount, and we're confident that that project will be delivered in this time frame. So there's a little bit more conservatism in the way we've interpreted the matrix, which results in a slightly reduced development contribution right across Live-In, Tarahika and Northeast Live-In predominantly. Any questions on that? The next slide is effectively the summary table. It may be helpful if you can
read it on screen. What we effectively highlighted over in the light brown column is the change from the draft. So you'll see that there's a significant reduction from all of the draft long-term plan, and we consciously, when we went out for consultation, had to ensure that we went out with an upper limit, because if we consulted on a development contribution and then only to do further work and then land on a final that was higher than the draft, then that would effectively trigger a process to go and need to reconsult. So the ones in the light brown are indicating that there's been reductions right across all of those development contributions, but being also mindful of some of the submissions that we've heard when you refer right to the far column on your right, right across the district there are still increases from the draft, from the LTPA process 12 months ago. So if you can sort of got a read on the brown column is reduction from draft that we've just consulted on, but the far right is indicating an increase across the board. And then if you refer to the fourth column from your right, that's the new titles, which for Live-In is around about 21k, 27 for Tara Ika. And that reflects that over the course of the last 2 years, we've redirected some of the targeted funding for development specific in Tara Ika out to the wider Live-In network. And then Live-In North East newly introduced this long-term plan, which is primarily driven by that almost $7,500 contribution per lot to the localised stormwater network for North East Live-In. I'd say probably 2/3 of that investment's already been made in terms of the construction that's on the ground with Coley Pond. You've got 15k Foxton, 10 Foxton Beach, 16 at Shannon, 31 in Tokomaru, predominantly driven by the wastewater of contribution around about 23k, and that's really on the basis that it's such a small community, only 160 new residents, and you'll see in upcoming months you'll see some updates around the recommended option to move forward with consenting of the wastewater solution in Tokomaru, and that is budgeted around about $5 million in the long-term plan. But when you proportion that across a small number of residents, it results in quite a significant contribution. And we've got Waitangi there at 14, and Ohau, both those are impacted by future feasibility studies. That direction from elected members was to advance in year 2 of the long-term plan. So they're effectively placeholders because that servicing provision isn't actually available at the gate, unlike the other settlements where we have development and train. So the Ohau and Waitangi are slightly skewed by those additional servicing, and if development was to occur, then there'd be an assessment which would effectively remove that connection cost and contribution. I think what we're targeting with the deliberations report to give that summary will probably help get a deeper understanding about what's driving some of the movement that's now reflected in the development contribution model. So we are endeavouring to have that completed and included in the deliberations reports.
Thank you. And as we move from that section into this final section, it continues the theme of drawing out any further information and questions that you may have or like before deliberations. So as we look there, we just wanted to take a look at what the next 6 weeks look like. So we've got today our workshop with information and an opportunity to ask questions. The next one down in blue is next week's workshop, where we seek to provide remaining information that has been sought, and then head into deliberations the following week. So it's all happening quite quickly. In between that, we've got audit starting next week. So as has been mentioned, getting documents off to audit for them to begin reviewing from Monday. Once we move through deliberations, we will again head into audit for our final audit there. Then we move into adopting the fees and charges so that notifications for dog registrations can go out in time for that to start from the 1st of July. And then seeking adoption of the full long-term plan on the 26th of June.
So probably just a couple of things to pick up there as we're joining these pieces together. So yes, we're starting to audit based on what we have at the moment, remembering that our council was one of those councils that didn't go through that first audit of the consultation document and things. And so this is quite a new process, being in this stage where usually they would have done quite a lot of work, come back here, and then it's focused on a couple of areas. What our auditors are particularly nervous about is what's called the hot review, which is where we actually have to send off, our documents go off on the 27th of May, so just a couple of days after deliberations. And we, at this stage, will be one of the very first councils going through the hot review that hasn't had that pre-audit. So that creates some nervousness because we're not quite sure how they're going to manage that. The auditors have signalled that when they did the hot reviews for the consultation documents and things, that was sort of done within 24, 48 hours. It's meant to be a pretty fast sort of process. They're anticipating that the hot review might take a little bit longer. It won't quite be the same sort of quick turnaround. But essentially how they're going to sort of satisfy themselves with all that information that hasn't been previously audited and where they're going to focus their efforts in that hot review is a little bit of a mystery and an unknown. One of the things we've always been quite keen on, probably for about the last 3 LTPs, is getting early into the hot review process. There was a period of time where we were at the back end of the hot review process, and what happens is things go through the hot review process, the bar goes up and up and up. So if you're at the back end of the process, there's all these things, oh, they've done that really well, they've done that well, and suddenly they start asking that of others. So on the one hand, it might work to our advantage where we might not have, the bar might not be quite as high, but equally there is some nervousness around just how we go through that hot review, given we are in this unique situation, and for our auditors and essentially the hot review team as well. What I guess and this will hopefully just sharpen the focus of the next few minutes, is the 22nd and 23rd of May become really important. We obviously turn up here, and I'm sure Monique will have used these words previously, we essentially need to keep you here until we make decisions, because, as we say, soon after that we're providing documents that are both being audited and go to that hot review. So where we're about to move to in a moment is trying to make sure we use today, followed by the 15th, that we're really clear on making sure you've got what you need to be able to turn up here making decisions on at those deliberations. Do you want to talk about that?
And so, continuing, we are really at that critical point where we are seeking to draw out any further information that you would like to make sure that we have addressed any questions, so that you have all of the information you need to be able to make those decisions at deliberations. And what we'd like to do is just step through the different parts that you will be making decisions on to look at whether there are any remaining questions, whether there is any information that you do need, and whether there are, as has been mentioned earlier, some combinations that you would like us to model now to give you that fuller picture as you hear it. So what we've done is just, did you want to?
Just to make the point that obviously in some cases, if we can get any direction from here today, it might be a case of us providing you with information. Some of it might be able to come back for next week's workshop. Some of it might be information you just want to see included in the actual deliberation reports, where we're adding that into the analysis, so you've got that information and then you are able to weigh up those things that are on your mind. And some of that might be based on, obviously we tried to take the opportunity during the hearings to note down those things off the back of maybe a submission has raised a particular matter that's caused you to think about something that I'd like to understand the analysis or the numbers on that. Might be things you've thought about since then, or it might be as you're just starting to piece the puzzle together based on what you've heard today. There might be some things that have come to your mind. So we'll step through it in the framework of
I guess, the LTP and how you'll anticipate these coming to you as deliberation reports. If we get to the end of that, there's something that's on your mind and you're not quite sure where it's raised, don't be silent on that. We'd much rather know today and make sure that we understand that, and then we can possibly also point where that might feature in the reports as well.
I don't know how to word this properly, but based on that pick and mix model that you talked about as we go through deliberations, is there any chance that you have some sort of live model going rather than having a whole lot of static models?
So our process has been previously just as an Excel table spreadsheet, and as you go through making changes, and that will also be partly why the deliberation reports won't necessarily go topic 1 in number order. Topic 1 will actually come later on, because you'll make some decisions as you go through and you'll see the number go up, down, and things as you make cuts or add things in. And then ultimately we'll come back to topic 1 essentially, which is around the rates, and ultimately you need to have that understanding of the decisions you've made, the impacts of those, what's that actually meaning for the number you're getting to. So there will be a spreadsheet which will basically have live and be making those changes, or as you make decisions we'll be keeping it updated.
From a process point of view, how can we engage in a process like that, sort of testing things and experimenting rather than making hard and fast decisions?
So, councillors, you'll recall the calculator that we offered to you last year to help assist you with your decision making to adopt the draft, and so that's a similar tool that we can provide to you ahead of deliberations, so that in your own kind of process that you're going through to think about how you come to the table to hear the views and then make the decisions, that you've thought about the impact of that or that. I do just want to emphasise topic 1 is going to be the last paper you decide, because topic 2, topic 3, and then all of those miscellaneous topics, everything from surf life saving to the water wheel and Shannon, like those are, there are particular things, particular decisions in front of council that will then impact where you land when you come to topic 1, because topic 1, which is probably one of my rebuttals to your point earlier, Councillor Jennings, is that like 17.4 won't be your starting point, because unless council doesn't consider any of the other funding requests or other considerations that council's given to through the process.
I won't argue with about that. But my question was going to be, so in terms of that calculator then that's provided, will it have the things preloaded where someone has asked for a specific amount of money? So like I'm thinking like all those community organisations and other things, or will we add those in? Like I don't mind, like it doesn't matter.
Like where there's been an extra funding request.
Yes, so where someone has said...
So there's not many of them, so I think we can load them in.
Because that would be useful to have some visibility of, like we've had it through the submission, but it'd be visible to have it in the thing so that we can say, based on this, option 2 where we started, 17.4, and if we accepted everything that has been asked for, then this is what it takes us to, and then we apply the other savings that take us to 16, because I want to see sort of the overall opinion, because presumably as a council, that first lot of savings, this 1.4% of savings, are you saying we don't even have to accept that? Like it's not even a council decision to say, yes, we'll take those savings or not. They're just going to happen. And so therefore our starting point is there, because that's what we've asked you to do. Is that the kind of... Yeah, okay.
Can I also ask, Monique, if we go through all those item by items, and then we get to the end and people say, oh no, that's too high, let's go back and revisit. I just want to make sure that we can't do that, because I don't want this. That's where the calculator through prior to deliberations is really important, because if we make a decision to support surf life saving or whatever it is, and we add extra money in or we take out, and then someone said, oh well, we've got down to 15.5, that's too low, let's add another 0.5% in or something. I just want to make sure that that won't be allowed to happen, or will it?
Well, you are the chair. And standing orders prevail, and so council may get to the end of a process and someone might want something reconsidered, and that would require revocation of a resolution, and that has a whole lot of procedural matters. I wonder whether at next week's workshop what might be helpful is for you as an elected member table to have a conversation about that decision making process, because certainly how you've just articulated it was the approach we took for the preparation of the draft, and I know, for example, Councillor Proctor at the time, he was really challenged by that. He didn't. So I think if you as elected members have that conversation and can agree to that process, then that will help the 22nd and 23rd go relatively smoother. Which is also what you agreed last long-term plan amendment, and then you got to the end, and it was tricky, right? Because you were trying to, from memory, it was save 0.4% of rates, and it took like 3 hours. But that's, I don't say that in jest. Like, I say that genuinely. It's because the decisions are hard. Yeah.
Yeah. I think what you're proposing is going to be tricky, because we are going to get to that point at the end of the day where people are going to want to revisit things. I don't know how we have a bit more of an adaptive process with some experimentation, whether there's a set time where we look at playing with different things rather than stepping through individual items. Because we step through individual items, those that are first will most likely have a weighting towards the decisions we make, or remaining or being cut.
Now, sorry.
I was just going to say, the other thing I don't want, though, Jonathan, is everyone to be predetermined in terms of what they may think, because I think deliberations are very much around, do I agree with the Deputy Mayor in terms of, what he's suggesting or not? No. and that may well change your mind in terms of how you're going to support something or not support something. I think that conversation that Monique's suggesting next week is probably key, is that there's an understanding around how that process will work, and we can reach some sort of consensus in terms of how that will be. I admit that there will be challenges to that. I can see it now, because people will want to go back and revisit. But if we can set some reasonably, not totally rigid, but some ground rules in terms of that, it would be helpful.
Well, that's why I go back to one of my first questions was, is there a clear line of majority around some options from the submissions that we could put next to some of the items as well that might guide us. But this is the issue with the not starting with the 17.4%, is that it arguably opens up everything, all the individual line items that are proposed cuts under 17.4%. So we either start at that position with that as a package, and then or you don't, because otherwise, we're basically saying that each of those line items under 17.4%, and then under option 3, everything's live. So it's start from 23.6. But we didn't. We start our preferred option was option 2.
I mean, I think we're going to have to. We can't avoid the discussion on each of those items, can we? Because that's what we've consulted on. So, burn mowing or the affordable housing plan or whatever have all got to be discussed individually, because there'll be some that support retaining burn mowing.
So I think if you think about the approach that you took to adopting the long-term plan, where essentially, like that at that council meeting where you adopted it, option 2 at that stage had, from memory, there were 1 or 2 things that councillors made some concessions on to keep it as a package. You have consulted on option 2 as a package. versus option 3 was additional things. So the intent of our deliberations report was that option 2 has been presented as a package, albeit no doubt the council table may want to utilise standing orders based on the evidence and advice you've got in front of you about taking some of those options out within that option. The rates calculator will support you in that decision making, but we hadn't intended on presenting a report that provided a debate on burn mowing, for example, or on what's another example in there. It's on option 2, which as of January was 17.4%. We're now saying that's 16%. Versus option 3, you consulted on the individual options.
So we're starting at 6. Yeah, so the 16% includes. So basically, when we get the council submission, I've forgotten the name of the report. What do you call this? No, but I thought it was the management submission, the management team submission, where you're basically saying some additional, because the deliberations report is one thing, but then there's isn't there a separate submission from council? Aren't they moving from assumptions to reality?
Yeah, I think what we're just saying to you is that the cost of option 2 is now 16%, not 17.4%.
May I just comment as well, and just want to clarify, in relation to the options in terms of a model, we can have something for you that has the rates and the borrowings impact, for example. So if you decide to change the depreciation funding, then you know that that's going to increase debt as well. One option, and I know it's not till deliberations when you'll decide, is that like we did with the Better Off funding, is you could have each elected member out to the side and whether they think they're going to indicatively support something or not, so that as you're working through it, any option that gets put on there, you could get a bit of a sense, or you can do it individually. It's up to you.
The other question I had, Jacinda, with the deficit that we're going to have on June the 30th, we've projected that to be 7.5.
It is factored in. Okay, all right, cool.
So obviously some process stuff to work through. Sounds like that'll be good to work through next week. We're about to step through. This was the first slide of each of the topics and beyond. So again, the 3 questions are up there. Is there anything else relating to option 1 that we just need to be aware of, that you want us to either be modelling, need additional information, or whether you've got questions that you need answers to help you make a decision? Okay, well, we'll move on to the next one, and again, you can come back if you need to. So the second topic was the waste one. So again, we've got the 3 parts to that, but the same 3 questions we're asking.
So yeah, I did have I was going to ask for some modelling on 2A. So this is in response to the submissions around having a differential for this. I would like to see what that looks like based on the current differential, and therefore also what that means for the percentage of targeted rates, and then what it means for that representation and governance portion that's come out of the targeted rate into general rate. And so I'm just keen for a dollar figure or a percentage around what percentage of that, if moving to a differential rate, what does that, what's the impact in for a representation and governance rate?
No, and it had been noted last week. It's in scope of the reports. Not particularly ABC, but relative to waste management. Written submissions and through the hearings, a number raising the fact around the bag being $4 should increase at least $1, maybe to $5. I know during workshops we talked about $6, but that got the no. So maybe $5, and because it's come through, I would like to debate it. Yeah, got that on the list.
Great, right. So option 3 was the 2 targeted rates, the community board, economic development, and then we had the rates for emission policy.
May I just mention in relation to the rates for emission policy, when you get the presentation, we will include the schedule that includes each part and what we predict everyone would receive under a full model with no cap, and then with the cap that's been assumed, just so you can make sure you're clear in leading into the deliberations what the proposal was.
Okay. Number 4.
Yeah, that rates remission policy, it's there's quite a bit of feedback on that, and I thought it was about right, but I've had a second thought on maybe 1 or 2 parts of the 17. So I not right now have the question exactly for you, but I will email and CC everybody when I've thought through that just a little bit more.
Thank you. Number 4 was fees, charges, and the other policies. So we had the development contributions and significance engagement policy.
So David, the one thing that came through in a couple of conversation submissions was this whole concept of Swedish rounding. And I don't think it's material in terms of the fees and charges, but I was kind of keen to see what the impact is if we did just round to the nearest buck. Don't go to too much work on that. I just think if we can just have an estimate or a forecast of are we talking a few $1,000, or is it actually more material than that?
We were going to pick up the idea of the staged timing of development contributions as an option, or it's
a good idea.
Yeah, the deliberations report will provide some analysis on that. It will tell you that our options are very limited because of our debt capacity, but yeah, it's in here.
okay. So
Sorry, what we're taking though, that says what we went out to consult on, what we're now proposing, though, I assume the comparison.
And so then we've got, so those are all the other topics we specifically consulted on, but as you want to read through the submissions, there's a range of submissions that have covered other topics, whether that be things relating to the district plan, things relating to land transport, all those things which weren't necessarily a key topic. And so officers are obviously working through responses to those, providing any relevant analysis, and then obviously what comes through as an officer comment and recommendation. Of the things that did get raised, think of those 3 questions, but I'll just prompt you with the next slide of how I guess we are looking at grouping those submissions that came through. So using those bigger activity headings, but that's where we're looking at sort of slotting everything that came through, from kids talking about the mall being 2 stories and having a Kmart and things like that, to matters relating to footpaths, shared pathways, bridleways, and so on. We'll go under those different topics there.
So hopefully, well, I don't know, those may act as some prompts for you to think about. Actually, we had a group or we had a submitter talk about that. I do want to know or have some information coming back to the 3 questions we've just been asking you.
How do we, or when do we, because it might not be necessarily something for deliberations, but a decision of council. For example, a piece of work that we want to, put into maybe in the next financial year, property, doing a stock take of our lease arrangements, and I've raised this and just I'll frame it. So where we derive our income from, revenue, limited sources, mostly rates, some grants and subsidies and fees and charges. We don't have a resource necessarily like some other councils do. So we do own property though, and we don't exactly get the greatest of returns that we're not getting market value for some of them. Therefore, ratepayers are subsidising some significant amounts if you add it all up. And I'd like to propose a review of all our leases to understand exactly where there might be some movement or shifting in a period of time. But that's not necessarily a request for money, but it is for something to be done about X. So is that for something to deliberate on, or just we'll save it for another meeting? No, because I think the section that we can capture that in is obviously we had a couple of submitters that gave some ideas around other revenue opportunities, and so there is some analysis and at the moment a high level response, which is that we'll give this due consideration. But that's the opportunity for elected members to kind of use that stuff as a prompt to either put a motion forward on the table on the day, or to ask for us for advice now. If it's not captured as a resolution, then the other avenue is obviously the work program in terms of chief executive setting of KPIs, and so maybe just have a think about what avenue you think might be best for that.
Can I ask a final different sort of question? And it was sort of going back to your timeline of all the things that we have to do in the audit process. At some stage after deliberations, are we going to get like some sort of communication timeline on how we feed back to the public, and how are you going to go back to all these people? Is that being considered, or is it sort of we've done this and that's it, now we move on?
We are looking and making sure that we do connect back with everybody after this as well. So we're looking at a few different ways at the moment that there'll be direct communication back through letters or emails to ratepayers who submitted with the overview of everything that council has decided. Feeding back to those people who submit on these activities and the direct requests or ideas about what was decided there as well. Looking again at doing an insert that goes in with the rates letter, the invoice and the rates rebate form about what was decided as well. And then feeding back to the schools as well about what's happening. Yeah. But looking to maintain some of those connections, and also when we do other consultations as well, how can we build on what we've got going from here?
Good question to ask us in the sense that it is obviously it's a new way we've engaged, and we watched videos during the LTP hearings and things like that, and the team's done well to pick out the nuggets or the things that they asked, and we're now working through responding to those in the deliberation reports. But yeah, some of those, how do you go back to the kiddo who spoke on the video and things like that. So yeah, we're working through that, but the goal is definitely to close the loop. and also to do that in a cost-effective way, which is why we just probably want to manage expectations around. There's a certain number of pages that you can put inside an envelope with our mail house supplier. So when they've got a rates invoice plus the letter, and then and the rebate stuff, and then we're looking to put in a document that talks about the decisions. It's not going to be possible to basically sort of go into detail, high level of detail, detailed level of all those decisions that were made. So it's going to talk about some of those key decisions and then point them to where they will need to then go and find some of that information, and that will be again down to us to present that in a digestible form on the website and places like that. Because to send out a separate letter to ratepayers, it costs us over 20 grand at the moment, and we don't want to do well. Yeah, so we are trying to find ways to close the loop in a cost-effective way, and the worst thing we can do is engage people and then not help them understand how their feedback's actually been considered and taken on board.
Under land transport, there was quite a number referring to the cycleways and walkways, a budget, and then we've obviously got, I think, an allocation currently of about 700,000. That's subject to confirmation from NZTA that they're going to do their part, 60%, whatever. But we've left it in there like a placeholder, and is it necessary to resolve that as subject to funding, or we just leave it regardless and then talk about it later? I don't know how that's working.
Well, in theory, it would just mean a reduced scope. So I think it's probably inferred that down the track we will have options around how we can move within that budget across different placeholders. So we could think about some sort of resolution around that. The team are busy working in the deliberations report at the moment, but I think we've fairly well covered what the risks are, and that we won't know until quarter 3 of this year.
Did you want to come? Just one thing on the community facilities and services. So those community organisations that have asked for budget support, just speaking from experience last time round, we spent a lot of time arguing over, in some cases, $5,000. So I'm just thinking in terms of how that's actually presented in the report, what I would be looking for is like that global view. So yes, I know we have to go through them individually, but having real clarity over how much did they ask for, how much is already budgeted, what's the additional amount that would impact on the calculator, just so it's really easy to navigate, and then you can get a total picture of, are we talking $50,000, or is this actually the request is $500,000? So I think we've already got a sense of it through submission, but I'll just be from a clarity. AI, the whole process, and last question for you, it might be an unfair question, Monique, is there anything that your team is anticipating in terms of motions or expecting the table to raise through the process, like that you're already planning for, just in terms of an extra funding request or extra budget line? Is there anything that you guys are already sort of anticipating from the table, based on what you've heard or the sentiment through any of the process?
Yeah, I don't know if I quite understand the question. Is are we trying to read the room? Is that what you're asking me?
You would have read the room, and so is there anything that you're already preparing for in terms of that you're expecting to come from the table at the 11th hour in terms of, I want this added into the budget?
We're putting our energy into those options we're consulted on. And I've not had a signal or a steer from the council table on additional things other than obviously the work we've done inside the business to whether it's been because we're not trying to be difficult by turning 17.4 into 16. We're trying to help. We're trying to and we're trying to be upfront about that to then assist your decision making around option 2 and option 3. I think we're eager for direction on a couple of those items. Climate change is an example. But no, I don't think we've. Yeah, conscious that there's a few funding requests that council need to give consideration to. And while there are things that have been raised and there's been information requested outside of kind of the key things we consulted on, a lot of the additional information you have asked for are things that have been signalled in the LTP, so things like depreciation funding, things like different options on. Yeah, no. Unless I'm missing something. You got me worried now. What am I missing?
I guess the point of your question would be that as a table, I don't want to be hitting day one and the night before and getting emails or solicitations or whatever about, hey, I'm racking up because I want to put 500,000 into the budget to build a great big playground in Shannon. I think we've been through this process long enough and been working on it long enough that I'd just flag that you wouldn't it'd have to be all about climate change to get my support the night before. Okay.
Yes, and on that note, we'll so thank you for all of your feedback, and it's been very helpful.
If you are speaking to anyone who you felt was connected to the LTP process, these are going to be out in the foyer as of tomorrow. Obviously part of this, again, initiative of engaging differently, but also trying to, I guess, help close the loop in terms of people seeing their feedback actually come to something, is bringing visibility to that. So rather than just knowing there's a submission document somewhere and a report that considers that, these will be out in the foyer and hopefully catch the eye. But again, there will be people you've spoken to and things, and a little prompt or a nudge would be great. We think the team have done a great job sort of pulling it all together, and it would be a shame if it was only you guys who got to see it, take it on board. And for those of you who didn't get to some of the different events, just taking a few minutes to look at both sides of the board and things like that for the ones that you weren't at would be really worthwhile as well.
Cool. So I'll just get Alice to bring up the next presentation. Given the timing, Aroha, who is going to lead this, has had to head off. She's got kapahaka practice, but I will lead, and I know that Councillor Tamihana and Councillor Barker are going to assist. The purpose of this workshop is to provide an update to elected members on the progress that we're making around the Māori engagement framework. When Council endorsed the approach to the Māori engagement framework and appointed councillors to the project advisory group for the Māori engagement framework, we'd committed to making sure that we're providing progress updates, and obviously we've been doing that via way of the organisation performance report, but it seems like an important time just to give elected members a bit of an update about how it's going, a bit of a feel for the progress. We've got some particular topic that we're keen to get some feedback on ahead of our next project advisory group meeting tomorrow night. Look at that. Because Adol has written it, I've not even followed the slides. And so I just want to remind Council about kind of where have we come from. And so reminding Council that late last year we sought endorsement, we asked you questions about were you comfortable with the approach, did you support the establishment of the advisory group, We'd checked in on you around the appointment of counsellors, around the meeting fees to reduce barriers for participation. You'll recall the Waikato Regional Council Māori Engagement Framework, which we've continued to use as a guide to check in with counsellors about expectations. And through that period, we've also continued to seek expectations and direction from council. You'll also recall that we set a timeline, and I know that many councillors at the time made comments about how the timeline was ambitious, but we've continued to be really steadfast in articulating to our partners about the importance of this work and about the need to continue to make progress. And what you'll hear soon is a bit of an update about the progress. So this was the original timeline that we committed to. The hui with all iwi partners prior to Christmas, that took place while we didn't have all our iwi partners in the room. The hui definitely took place. The context obviously was developed throughout January, and then we did not have our first project advisory group meeting until March. So there was no PAG meeting in February, but there, I'll move to the next slide. We've had 2 project advisory group hui, and we have the 3rd one tomorrow. And I'll hand over to Mike and Justin, just butt in when you guys want, about how it's going. But obviously pre-Christmas, it was about getting our partners to understand the why, get their feedback about the process ahead of council's endorsement on the approach. The first 2 project advisory group meetings have been far more formal in that they've been focused on the getting to the point of developing a framework. The first project advisory group was very much scene setting, but also conversations about outcomes, expectations, what success might look like at the end of this, and some reflection on the Waikato Regional Council framework. And from there, the project advisory group has given Aroha, Brent and I some really good guidance on the essentially the context and the structure of the framework, and we also through those first couple of meetings have got agreement from our iwi partners that rather than we turn up with blank pieces of paper, which was always our intention because we wanted this to be a co-design process, to actually us start doing some of the work in between meetings. So at our last project advisory group meeting, we presented, in advance of the meeting, we presented section 1 as a draft, and we used the project advisory group meeting to essentially thrash out section 1. Section 1 is now section 2, and section 2 is, and it's great because that shows kind of the power of the conversations, because section 2 is all about the purpose and the why, and section 1 is now about the who we are in our landscape. So section 2 is it is in final draft form. It is with our iwi partners who have all had the opportunity to contribute to it, and I know we got some final feedback yesterday, which was actually kind of endorsing it. Section 1 is in development phase, and that is we've been able to use the Tūhono toolkit, which we developed last year for council staff as the kind of the genesis of section 1, and that is now with each of our iwi partners for their feedback and input. We're kind of describing section 1 as they write, because it's their story to tell, not council's story to tell about our landscape and who we are. And so tomorrow's hui is very much hopefully focused on settling section 1 and section 2, and then preparing for the preparation of section 3, which will then be the focus of the June PAG meeting. Section 3 is the hard section, because it's about the how. and the actual tools for engagement and the way council will do that, and then that leads us into then how does council resource that and what does that look like. Mike, Justin, did you want to add anything before I talk about partnership?
No, I was just going to get to what came out of the last meeting for me was it seemed that there was the risk that we were confusing an engagement framework with actually a partnership agreement, which from my point of view seems to be quite a different thing. And if that was the case, that kind of went way beyond the brief that I believed we'd been given to look at that. Given the, I don't know, ramifications, implications, connotation of what partnership means instead of an engagement framework, I think in the end we really need to be clear about that. The other thing that I've been thinking about in relation to this whole process is that if whatever it turns out to be, I do believe that we need some kind of ratification from our community for it. Like, not just, oh, well, we've done this and this is how it is now. I think we need some reflection from the community, especially if there are aspects that actually are, as been said before, akin to partnership that finally come out of it. But these are my views, and in the end, we'll have an agreement, I guess, that is a democratically developed instrument. So, yeah. But it's, I just generally, I still been thinking about this too. I think we really, really need to go with the less words, the better. I think the more words, the more confusion, generally speaking. So, yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at the moment.
And that's been some feedback from our area partners as well. Like the first section 1 that was drafted was like 11 pages long, and it was exceptional work from Aroha, but we've now got it down to 2.5 pages. By just being far more articulate about what are we trying to achieve and what does it mean. Justin, do you want to comment?
Tutai mi ana kia koutou Ngāuri, Māori, i te wahine. So to all our iwi partners, I think firstly just thanking them for participating, to be honest, because it hasn't been an easy process to get them in the room together and be open to conversating this matter. Also want to thank Council, my elected members that participate, Mike and Rogan and Nina also, and Nina did give her apology before she left this evening and wanted to be here for this presentation. I think you're right, it was an ambitious timeline that we put ourselves in, but I think the work that's been done has actually been really fruitful. And I pick up on Councillor Barker's points. Everyone has those points, but what we're working towards here together is an important document. It's an important piece of work that's going to inform not only council but our wider community about how we do work with our iwi partners and how we celebrate those relationships. Picking up on Mike's point around partnership, one of the points I have heard come back from all the iwi partners is around the use of the word framework and engagement, and I think for purposes that we set out with to create a framework, yes, it resonates well for the time, but I certainly feel the points that the iwi partners have raised, that it's more reflective about what a partnership is and how a partnership works. And so, just taking that on board, they're very clear too in their aspirations to want to partner with council and understand how we work better together across all sectors actually that we're involved in. Obviously, our iwi are really clear about their priorities to people, to the whenua, to maintaining those connections that they have to those spaces and places, and also their inter-iwi relationships that they work hard to maintain and protect, I suppose, at points in time. And the other thing too, Aroha has done an amazing job. One thing that we kept hearing iwi partners saying is they didn't want council to hold the pen. However, there's been lots of times that council have had to pick the pen up, and I get it. You know, some of it's capacity, some of it's time commitments, and all those other things that are going on. And Aroha's filled that void, I think, extremely well to support not only us as council, but also our iwi partners, to ensure that, one, we're hearing what they're saying to us, two, we're capturing what they're saying to us, and three, that we're able to reflect back through our documents and through our conversations, those meaningful conversations that are occurring all the time. So yeah, I won't go on any further. Like I said, it's been really great having the other elected members there to share their views. I really appreciate those views. It's really balanced, and I'm sure we're going to get to an amicable outcome that people will be proud of.
So the point of today was to, I suppose, give council that reassurance that the project is tracking. Sure, it's not happening as fast as maybe some elected members might like. At times obviously we're expecting a lot from our iwi partners, and having everyone in the room at the same time is a little bit challenging. But between myself and Aroha, we're trying to make sure that we fill in the gaps and maintain that communication with all our iwi partners. But also, we had given the PAG assurance that prior to our next PAG meeting, which is tomorrow, that we would check in with elected members around this word partnership, and because engagement framework is really council language, arguably it's Monique language, and we've tried to just get our iwi partners to not get caught up in what we call it. But through those conversations, there's been some really good kōrero about, well, what does partnership mean? Because for our iwi partners, they're really clear about what partnership means. And I've put a quote up there that came directly from our last PAG. We talk about partnership with tangata whenua as a key community outcome. So if we think about our 5 outcomes, we talk about partnership with tangata whenua. But as a council, we've never defined partnership. And so I think for Mike and Justin to be able to report back to our iwi partners tomorrow night that says, hey, we've had a conversation and we are on the same page when we talk about partnership, or we're not on the same page, is a really important step to help continue our conversations around the framework. Sorry, Pity.
Just a question for clarification for public and those that observe now or later. Could you please name the partners and the people that represent those groups in that forum? And perhaps there's a link, or they can find the terms of reference for that group on our website, or it might be made available. Could just name them.
I'm not sure we have terms of reference, but we can definitely provide some reference to the work publicly. So represented on the project advisory group, council, as endorsed by this council table, went to all our iwi partners. Rangatane is represented by the Chief Executive, Danielle. I should point out that every partner has been given the opportunity to have 2 representatives. Some are just choosing to bring 1. Moepuku Tribal Authority have not formally attended a PAG meeting yet, but they are represented by their Chief Executive, Di, who is engaging in the conversations, albeit they've not been able to attend a PAG. For Raukawa, we wrote to both Te Runanga o Raukawa and Te Tūmata Kāhoki and asked them to sort it out amongst themselves. And so Te Tūmata Kāhoki represent those hapu that affiliate with Te Tūmata Kāhoki, and they are represented by Shane Royal, their chair, and Wayne Kiriona. Te Korohi do not affiliate with Te Tūmata Ka Hoki. Sorry if I've used the wrong word there, affiliate, but they're not connected into the Te Tūmata Ka Hoki Rōpū, and so they've had mixed representation of Kere Mehana, Heke, and Rangi Marcus and Kelly Bevan are kind of, they're rotating the representation, and Ngāti Apa, who we've continued to keep a open line of communication to, have chosen not to engage in the work.
And can you just name the groups or the hapu within Te Tūmata Ka Hoki? Just for our listeners, so they know whether they're captured.
I agree with Piri's comments that it would be nice in a report to see either the minutes of some meetings or who's participated and things like that. It seems a bit high level, this brief.
Yeah, can you? I'm just making sure that I don't miss anyone, so I was bringing up the paper.
My understanding for the record from north to south is Ngāti Te Ao, Ngāti Tūranga, and Ngāti Rākau of Foxton. And then we come into Shannon, Hanana, Ngāti Whakatere, move across to Porotawhau, Ngāti Huiki Porotawhau, Ngāti Huiki Matau. Out to Kopaturoa, we have Kiriru Marae, which is Ngāti Takihiku and Ngāti Ngarongo. Then we move down into Levin, where we have Ngāti Hikitanga out near Papuaitonga, as well as Ngāti Kikopiri at Kikopiri Marae, and then at Hokio Beach there is Ngāti Pariraukaua and Ngātuko Waru Marae, and then as we move south it goes into Ngāti Wihiwihi at Wihiwihi Marae Manukau.
And just for clarification, that was the approach as endorsed by Council. But I'm hearing from you, Jonathan, keenness to make sure that the minutes get circulated to councillors?
Yeah, I suppose some version of the number of meetings that participated or number of attendees and things like that, just for transparency.
Any other questions before you maybe just have a quick conversation about partnership and what it means for council? What's that?
For another day, that's probably defined through this process together, rather than us.
Yeah. Well, and because when I said quick conversation, like there's irony in that, right? Because it's a really important conversation. But I think what would be helpful for Justin and Mike ahead of PAG tomorrow is, are we talking about engagement or are we talking about partnership? Well, engagement's an expectation of partnership. Is maybe.
I think it's. I don't think it's fair. Well, I just don't think it's the right thing to do to default to partnership defined in the treaty, given that there's as many people out there don't believe it is that do. And it's a loaded word in the modern environment we're in. I think it's something we need to be really clear about as a table, our version of what it means, and just saying, oh, well, we'll just let it sort itself out. Yeah, I don't know if our iwi partners have a clear understanding of what it means to them, then we have to meet them equally with our own clear understanding of what it means to us, and those understandings should meet somewhere.
We can't avoid it. We can't avoid it.
To be fair to the process, I wasn't going to speak to this matter because I think it's better that we hear from our fellow councillors about what they feel partnership does or doesn't mean to them. This is a question that's not new. This is a question that's been on that table since probably the first day they walked into this building, and the council have never been able to actually define what partnership or even what the treaty and the reflection of that means. And I think that's what our iwi partners are asking. I mean, they've actually given us very clear understanding of how and what they see partnership to be. But this council have never reciprocated, I feel, to a level where they're saying, okay, where do we start that conversation? Where's your starting point? And I just think that's some of the clarity that they're probably seeking and helping move this process forward.
I'm a little bit jet lagged, and I'll probably be a bit blunt, but I completely disagree with you. I mean, we've been quite open that we're developing a process here to engage that will lead on to a partnership. It's inherent in the work that we're doing. There's no point in doing an engagement strategy or coming up with a framework if we aren't going to have some sort of cooperation, association, alliance, whatever you want to call it, going forward in the future. And I mean, I think iwi are jumping ahead by saying, what does a partnership look like? When we're saying, well, hold on, let's set the ground rules on how we actually engage and talk to each other. I mean, that's the standard process across New Zealand. If you go into a treaty settlement, the first thing you do is what are our terms of negotiation before you even talk about any other process.
Yeah, I can. What Jonathan said, yeah, it's kind of, are we putting the horse before the cart? Because if we are, we could be making a mistake. You know, it's like setting up a situation where actually that's further down the track. But if we're going to end up with a de facto partnership, I think we need to be really clear about what that means to all involved.
I think through the course of council's relationships over the last many years, we use the word partnership. We have partnership agreements. We have a community outcome which, you know, should guide, is like a PO for us. It guides council, but what our iwi partners are, like in a really delicate way, what they're testing council on is, well, what do you really mean when you say partnership? And I'm not suggesting we necessarily need to resolve that right now, but what I'm signalling is that as we continue what will become at times hard conversations with our iwi partners about the how, what they've signalled really clearly is that, well, part of that how is about council being clear about what they actually mean when they say partnership.
I'll jump in before Sam. I mean, I think it can be summed up pretty simply in saying we're co-designing what partnership will look like through this process. So, I mean, yeah, we've started. We've laid it out there and said, well, there is no defined idea of partnership from council at this stage. We're co-designing a process now.
So on our plan on the page, where we talk about partnership with tangata whenua, we talk about it, I think, in a way that I'm very comfortable with. So, being a public meeting, perhaps I'll read it out for anyone online. We uphold Te Tiriti o Waitangi and its principles and recognise the role of mana whenua as kaitiaki of their rohi. We support them to maintain and enhance tikanga with their ancestral lands and waterways, wahi tapu and other taonga, and build mutually respectful partnerships with tangata whenua, supporting whānau, marae, hapu and iwi in achieving their aspirations. Now, to me, that is a very useful thing. Not only a useful thing, it's something that we adopted.
I think, however, what you've illustrated is that we describe partnership as a principle. And so, like, I've always looked at this through the lens of, this is about relationships, right? This fundamentally, if you look at it as an outcome, this is about defining how our relationships work. And so, I think we've already got relationships. We want to have better relationships. And yes, we might reference the word partnership, and absolutely it's like a core pillar, like it's a fundamental, because everyone's agreed that that's a core principle and outcome of the treaty. And so, like, when we talk about partnership, I always just think about a marriage, like a relationship, right? And so, and relationships are complex. That's the thing. It's like, in one context, my wife and I might make a decision together because we're equal partners. We're going to make a decision on whether we're going to buy a house or something like that. But in another context, it's so minor that actually we have trust and confidence in the other partner to make the right decision. In some contexts, we're both responsible for something. We're both accountable for it. In other contexts, I might make a decision that I'm solely accountable for. And so it's kind of like partnership. Defining partnership is actually really challenging because it's contextual, right? And so that's where, like, just cards on table, I always envisaged that this process would look at the framework for defining relationships, because with knowing full well that an outcome would be that with each partner, so for each, in the context of each relationship, there would be a partnership agreement that has more bespoke detail and clarification about expectations, because that's what it's all about. Is so the framework sets how are we going to do this, and how are we going to get to the point where we can arrive at entering into an agreement that has really clear expectations. We're really honest about, actually, we like to make decisions this way, whereas another partner might like to make them this way. This partner might have way different needs to this partner. And so we have to have that fundamental overarching framework. That just gives us the scope to define the relationship, acknowledging that where we want to end up is in genuine partnerships, because that's a core principle that's going to guide us. But so I think, like I wouldn't want to try and define partnership in just one sentence, because that for me, like, sets everyone up to fail. I think, like, if I'm honest, like the courts and the Waitangi Tribunal have given really good guidance on what partnership means, and it's changed, it's evolved, right, over time, that principle and what it looks like. And so I think that, I mean, I would find it quite useful to get, if there's already beyond this, if there's something that's been captured by our partners around what they think partnership looks like, I'd love to be able to use that as a starting point to go, well, is there anything I disagree with? Because that's like, there's I think we can find consensus so much easier than if we both start with a different position. Like, it's actually better to just do this collaboratively, and if one partner already has a view of what that partnership means and looks like, then let's put it on the table, because it's only going to enhance our ability to kind of go, well, yeah, we think that component can be addressed through a partnership agreement, an agreement between the two parties, but actually that component, yeah, we should build that into the framework, because that's common across all of our partners. So hopefully, I mean, sorry, I've just rambled on, but I'm really clear about this, the purpose and the intent and the value and the magic of the framework, because it will unlock our ability to talk so clearly about expectations, and which expectations that will change over time. So I'll shut up. Yeah, I agree with a lot of those comments. For me, it's also around being transparent, making sure that there is a level playing field, and that we haven't got secret agreements here or different partnership agreements here. So everyone can actually feel at ease and actually it's fair and equitable, if you like. And I think that's actually really important from historically where we've been, where, there's been, behind closed doors to actually in the open, transparent and welcoming, if you like.
If what Sam said is makes sense too. It's partnership, like this kind of partnership is being talked about as an umbrella over everything, whereas what you're talking about is individual agreements with partners. If I get where you're coming from, which that if we kept that out of it and went with that, that makes more sense, because they will be quite individual arrangements, different circumstances and different iwi, I imagine. So the problem is just being clear. Well, not the problem. Maybe the solution is just being real clear about that and saying, actually, we're not going to define partnership in the treaty. I mean, I could say, okay, hypothetically, or for argument's sake, okay, partnership as far as the treaty is concerned, in 1840, two people signed a treaty as both agreed to be equal partners with the equal rights and duties of equal citizens. And that's partnership. Someone else can have another view of that, although, they're welcome to it. But that's, for example, and there's as many versions of that out there on all sides of the debate, if you like. So keep it simple and just say the engagement framework is about we are engaging with iwi, as separately as a council, and we will create partnership agreements for that purpose. Perhaps.
I guess the issue with going down the path of the bespoke arrangements is we end up arguably where we've ended up now, in terms of you end up with bespoke arrangements when one party gets more than another, or one party has X and one party has Y. So I guess the benefit of the framework is that it provides that context for us to operate in a consistent manner and deal with all parties on an equal manner. Where I land at the moment is it kind of, when I see on a slide mixed attendance, and then hear that we've got a really important part of our community seemingly not fully engaged in these discussions, it feels like it's not going to work anyway. We'll end up in a situation where we've got the PMG and the NLG not talking to each other or not communicating. We're setting ourselves up to end in a result where that happens. For me, looking at this statement, I like this statement. I'm absolutely comfortable with how it's stated there. I'm also comfortable with removing the reference to the treaty as being the defining nature of it. And I think, for me, it can be simplified as down to working with partners for the benefit of our people and everyone else. So, and then if you can walk out of an agreement with that, you just keep it really simple and plain to define what that partners look like.
I think if council go back to what you set as the expectation about what good might look like at the end of this, just have a refresh of that framework from the Waikato Regional Council, because that doesn't define partnership, and it also doesn't articulate or outline the council's individual partnership agreements it has with those partners. But what it does is provides the framework, the umbrella, the we could think of a whole lot of analogies. The foundation for why it matters, how we'll do it, and what the mechanisms are that council will hold itself accountable for, but also what it expects of its in return. But then, sitting underneath that, and when I use the word underneath, I don't mean it in a hierarchical way. I could feel the reaction already there, Jonathan. What is connected to that is the partnership agreements and then the operationalisation of the partnership agreements. But that framework is the tool that allows the governors of Waikato Regional Council to say, well, that's how we do it, and then no doubt when issues arise, to be able to use that as the reference point to say the why, the what, the how, and the when. I think it would be helpful if maybe, we've got PAG tomorrow. What I'm thinking is we could provide a bit more of a comprehensive update to council, provide you the drafts to section 1 and 2 to give you a bit of a feel for it, and maybe, I think this is a helpful conversation, and it might be you might want to think about what does this look like if PAG and councillors came together and had a really open conversation about how we're tracking, what the next steps to the project look like, particularly noting that section 3 is where the harder conversations take place about the how.
Can I just say that that's one point I forgot to make, was that in that Waikato regional document, which this table discussed before as being a good it kind of felt right in terms of where we kind of wanted to end up, obviously acknowledging that there's a specific Horowhenua context. But there's an appendix at the end of it, which is called the Māori Partnership Approach. And so rather than kind of defining partnership, it just talks about the outcomes that we want to get to. And I thought that was kind of a note, like at least it would be a good starting point for discussion, because it's about the overarching way we want the relationship to end up, acknowledging that there's going to be some bespoke stuff around what actually partnership means to a particular partner. Just on that, I guess even as a result, and I guess you talk about appendix, it's having that those rules of engagement or that charter. So then when things don't go so well, you can actually go back to it and say, hey, look, we agreed as partners, participants, and however you want to set it up, but this is what we can actually use as a default mechanism to achieve. I think that's an important aspect, although it's probably is in your contract, or in your agreements already.
I was going to add that, based on what you were saying, I'm choosing my words carefully about how we think about this document, is it's also an important mechanism to show our community that we're thinking about this idea seriously, and it's actually something we can show the community that this is the way that we're going to undertake this process, rather than the ad hoc, random nature that has been undertaken in the past. So it's not so much telling iwi or telling partners on how we're going to do things and what the outcome is. It's actually showing the other parts of our community of how us as a council are actually approaching this topic in a serious and consistent, transparent manner.
Any other thoughts other than, do people like my idea of us feeding back more formally to council after the next PAG meeting, then maybe continuing the conversation? Yeah, or come along to PAG.
I think it's a good thing. It actually adds a bit of vigour to it, because then actually everyone's got the buy-in, and obviously it's a respect thing both ways as well.
Cool. And so thanks for the conversation. This was easy. We would have done it, council would have done it 10 years ago. And, there's only as I say, Waikato Regional Council is really the only other council that we can point to that's done something as comprehensive as this. I just want to endorse the comments about Aroha, who we're taking her out of her comfort zone, and she's doing an excellent job in navigating that. We're not going to have a framework adopted by June, but we're making progress. Yeah, Bernie, that's the end of that, I think.
Just to signal next week as well that we will be spending a bit of time talking about prospective